Stop hunting. Start finding. Choose the AT&T Real Yellow Pages with complete ads and up-to-date local listings to find just what you need.
Travel to Spain or Orlando Avenue. The finest restaurant featuring cuisine from Spain is open for business, lunch, and pleasure. El Bodegón, our very own 4-star restaurant, is open for business, lunch, and dinner. This is a true gem when it comes to real Spanish cuisine, featuring dishes like paella. El Bodegón also has a great wine selection. Enjoy a 4-star cuisine from Spain today for lunch or dinner at El Bodegón.
My universe is everything I imagine. I want to be a graphic designer. How can I get there? The Academy. It fits my busy lifestyle, and I can learn firsthand from instructors who've been there and know what it takes. Hey, my destiny is a career doing what I love, my way. My choice, my school. The International Academy of Design and Technology.
You imagine? We can get you there. Call 1-800-932-2900. 1-800-932-2900.
Hi, I'm Danny Ramos, and welcome to this week's edition of Hispanic Speak Out TV, brought to you on Bright House Cable every Tuesday night at 9:30 p.m. We have a great guest today. We're here with Alan Grayson, Congressman. I'm sure you all know Alan Grayson. He has over 90% brand name recognition in the state of Florida. Alan, how are you?
Very good. Let's see how we can boost it a little higher.
We have to come out with a product with your name on it with that kind of brand name recognition.
Diapers. How about diapers?
No. Scotch, something like that.
Oh, you mean something good?
Something impactful.
Impactful? Is that a real word, or did you just make that up?
Just made that up. How about oil? Talking about oil, okay. What's going on? How do you feel about the situation of drilling in the Gulf? With all the scandal that's going on with BP, all the issues of being able to control technology, how do you feel about that issue?
I'm against it. I've been against it the whole time I've been in office and even before.
Totally. You want to stop it all?
Well, what I said is that we have to not be treated like suckers. That's what I said. In Alaska, people who live there, anybody who lives in Alaska gets a check for over $1,000 a year from the oil companies just for living in Alaska because they take all the oil out of Alaska. I don't remember hearing an offer like that from BP or from anybody else.
Yeah, but that's a 3-mile limit, isn't it? Isn't
what
there
do you mean?
a mile limit for legal? I mean, how far does the Florida territory extend into the Gulf?
I don't know.
Okay, but it could be a 3-mile limit.
I didn't know there was going to be a quiz tonight. I mean,
Okay.
you didn't tell me that, okay? I'm not, for God's sake.
All right,
I
so
would
you
have
don't
studied harder if I knew there was going to be a quiz.
Well, it's just a question that popped up, would seem to be a normal sequence.
3-mile limits, well, I don't know.
Okay, but you're totally against any drilling of oil?
Honestly, I'm a congressman. I'm not on the Coast Guard or anything like that.
Okay. But you're against drilling anything? You're against all drilling, or just because right now
First
they
of all,
have a 5,000-foot well.
Yes.
And we have a lot of wells that are actually dug in 100 feet of water. So there's a big difference in the potential liability.
yes, and the potential damage too. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
there was a spill that was even larger than this spill once, and it was only 160 feet deep, and they were able to plug in and take care of the oil because the oil rose quickly to the surface, and they could eliminate it.
So
in this case, it's all over the place.
So you want to stop all drilling off the coast of Florida?
The only way I could see
Louisiana.
ever doing this is A, if it's really safe, and that's going to take a lot of convincing based on what we've seen already, and B, if it actually pays to the people who bear the risk, meaning the people of Florida or the people of Louisiana or the people of Alabama or Mississippi. It has to be made worth our while, the way it's made worth the while of the people who live in Alaska. And if they don't do that, then they don't deserve the work, because they are causing risk and causing harm to the people who live nearby. We've lost already, even at this point, we've lost already $2.5 billion worth of tourist business. We've lost $3 billion in terms of fishing. That's $5.5 billion in losses to date. And the number's increasing all the time. So why should we bear that kind of economic risk or burden in exchange for nothing? How come we're suckers when it comes to the oil companies? Why do they get whatever they want and give nothing in return? Why is that?
So what you're saying is the oil company should be paying the taxpayers of Florida a share of the profit, or how does it work?
Yeah, that's
in
the way it
Alaska?
works in Alaska.
So
That's
Alaska
right.
actually gets a share of the profit.
That's right.
And then it's paid
Well,
directly
they
to the
get,
taxpayers.
no, actually they get a share of the revenue.
Okay.
There's a fee paid for every barrel of oil that's removed.
Well, I think that's a good idea.
Well, you know, it's really not that much money that you'd be asking for. If you gave $1,000 to every person who lives in Florida, it would be $20 billion a year. 1 year, in 2008, One of the oil companies made a $40 billion profit, and that was just in 1 year. It was $44 billion in 1 year. That was Exxon's profit.
Are you going to introduce that bill?
Well, it's a state matter, but I would be in favor of it if
But
it came up at the federal level. I'm a federal congressman, so I can't dictate to Tallahassee. But I'm saying the only way it would ever be tolerable, and I'm not sure it's ever going to be tolerable, but if it were, it would have to be proven safe, and would have to actually benefit the people who live nearby, the people in Florida, the people in Louisiana, and so on, and not just leave them open to the kind of devastation that we've seen. You know, this is not just a matter of fish getting dirty or something like that. This has destroyed whole industries. The fishing industry is wrecked. The tourism industry is on its way to being wrecked. And they have inflicted enormous damage on others while they have their liability cap to protect them. So I think it's simply not fair unless they make it worth everybody's while.
I think that's an interesting idea.
Right,
That's a
well.
real interesting idea. Let's move on. Israel.
Yes.
A few days ago, Israelis boarded a ship which was supposed to bring aid to people in the Gaza Strip, and they were preventing, that was part of a boycott. It was part of preventing military or arms from going into insurgents. Are you for or against that kind of action? It was a direct, they boarded a ship, the military, special forces, Israeli special forces, boarded a foreign ship. Are you for or against that?
Well, it depends on what you're talking about specifically. Let me explain what I mean by that. I am for Israel protecting itself. I am for Israel preventing military equipment and arms getting into Gaza because the Gazans have used that to attack Israel through missiles and otherwise in the past. So I believe that Israel has the right to protect itself, and I think that that includes preventing anything resembling arms from coming into Gaza. So you have these ships that are approaching the Gazan coast. They're 90 miles away. The Israelis have to decide what to do. They have the right to make sure that the ships do not carry anything resembling arms or missiles or anything else that could be used against them. In what they did, they botched the effort because it would have been enough simply to incapacitate the engines of these ships or even the rudders of the ships to prevent them from getting to Gaza. That would have been enough. The Israelis used excessive force in this particular case because they were attacked by surprise, and they responded using overwhelming force and killed 10 of the people who were on the boat. That's a shame. Shouldn't have happened. There were easier and more effective ways to disable these boats before they reached their intended goal. Clearly, to have unarmed people fighting armed troops is a mismatch. And I think that at this point, even the Israelis regret the fact that there was a loss of life here that could have been avoided. But that's not to say that the Israelis don't have the right to defend themselves, because they do. And they have the right to make sure that in terms of controlling the border of Gaza, a place that has been caused untold harm to Israel over the past several years, took 1 million people in southern Israel and made them scared to go out in daylight every day because of all the missiles falling. A place like that, Israel has a right to make sure that no arms get into Gaza that can be used against Israel.
Mm-hmm. Well, taking it one step further, why can't, right now Israel is being condemned by many nations in the world for taking this action. The only nation I think that's taken a neutral action is the United States. They haven't actually condemned it, but they haven't actually said it was okay either. But most of the nations in the Mediterranean and in that area have all condemned Israel. It's going to happen again. We know it's going to happen again. This is not a solution. This is a situation that's in progress. What is the solution for what's going on there?
I think the solution is, in the short run, for Israel to use more effective means that don't involve the loss of life, to make sure that shipments into Gaza are shipments that do not contain weapons. In the long run, of course, the best result is peace. And I think that's still possible. I think that what happens over time is that people change their minds and the hostility eventually ends. Right now there's an enormous amount of hostility between Gaza and Israel, between the West Bank and Israel. And it's not a simple thing to dispel. But I'm hopeful that over the long run, people will choose peace over war. They have in many other places over many years. I don't see why this should be any different.
What's your take on the situation with the leadership of Iran versus Israel? Do you think Iran is going to continue proceeding along the way it's been proceeding? Or do you think it's all rhetoric? Do you think that there's going to be a conflict between Israel and Iran at some time in the future? I know it's speculation, but we have history to look at.
Well, I think that the rhetoric is horrifying if you actually listen to what they're saying. Ahmadinejad has said over and over again that he thinks that Israel should be destroyed. He already has the motive. What he's lacking right now is the means, the ability to actually destroy Israel. But if Iran develops a nuclear weapons program and develops nuclear weapons, it's a very simple thing for Iran to destroy Israel at that point. All they have to do is to take one nuclear device, put a timer on it, ship it to Ashdod, the port in Israel, and blow it up. And that would be enough to wipe out half of Israel's population. One bomb shipped in a shipping container. They don't even have to make it fly through the sky.
Well, they announced a couple of days ago that, and it was announced on some of the major medias, that Iran now has the capability to produce 2 nukes.
Yes, one to Haifa and one to Tel Aviv. I can see
Okay.
that coming.
All right.
And by the way, I misspoke. The port is in Haifa.
Okay.
But the point is the same. The point is that
Well, what can Israel do about that? If, look, you know and I know they're not going to stop. They're not going to stop in seeking the weapons that they need to do whatever it is that they want to achieve. Now, we can't foretell the future and say that, okay, the president of Iran is going to push the button on Israel. Okay? But we've seen that in history before where countries waited and then it was too late. What do you think Israel's position should be based upon Iran having the power of 2 nuclear weapons, 2 nuclear bombs?
Well, that's up to Israel to decide. But if Israel were in fact to try to disable Iran's nuclear capability and succeeded in doing so, then it would be perfectly understandable on their part to want to do so. And I would hope that their effort would be effective and actually would stop Iran's nuclear program until there was a more rational government in charge in Iran. Now look what happened. You know, history tells us it doesn't always repeat itself, but look what happened with Iraq. Iraq had a very similar program 30 years ago. The Israelis took it out, and as a result of that, they survived as a nation because a short time later, well, a short time being 20 years later, missiles rained down from Iraq on Israel, and if any one of those missiles had had a nuclear weapon on it, then Israel would have been destroyed.
The first one, it would have been the end.
That's right, that's the end. So they managed to dodge that bullet, or missile as the case might be, by taking out Iraq's nuclear program in 1981, and now they're facing a similar circumstance 30 years later in Iran.
As a United States Congressman, are you for Israel using military action to take out the nuclear capability of Iran with those 2 nukes that they claim to have? And it's been verified to some extent. Are you for it? Are you for, yes, the military of Israel striking Iran and taking those nukes out?
First, I don't think Iran has 2 nukes right now.
Okay.
I think they're still
Well, what if
several
they
years
did?
away from that.
What if they did?
But to answer your question, if they did, if Israel was able, first of all, to determine that they needed to do so, and secondly, that such an attack would be effective, which is a big if, actually. It's much easier to attack than to destroy. If Israel were to make that determination, then I would say that I would understand the purpose of that action because it's their survival that's at stake, and I would support it.
What about decapitating the government?
I don't think that's realistic.
No? And why is that?
You're talking about the entire Iranian government?
I'm talking about the leadership that leans in that direction,
Well,
which
I mean,
can be a smaller group.
Well, I mean, Iran.
Would you be for that?
I don't think
as an
that's. I don't
alternative?
think that's realistic. I don't think that killing Ahmadinejad would solve the problem in the least, and I don't think that killing any 50 people at Rand, well, in the leadership of Iran, would solve that problem. I think that the current Iranian leadership represents, to some degree, the sentiments of millions of people in Iran. It's not the same as it was in Iraq, where Saddam Hussein simply had established a military dictatorship and perpetuated it with very little support from any sector of society. In Iran, there is a very substantial number of people who support the theocratic dictatorship that has arisen in Iran. Not to say that a majority do, but a very substantial number do. And if 1 or 2 or 50 leaders were killed, there would be others to take their place.
Let's move on a little bit and let's talk about immigration in the United States,
Yes.
which is a real hot button that's dripping over into Florida right now because of the upcoming elections and a lot of sensitivity, and because of the fact that you have a great number of Mexican migrant workers working in Florida in the citrus industry. What's your take on the Arizona law?
Well, I'm against the Arizona law because the Arizona law is racism.
Okay, but
You can't arrest people because of how they look. That's a step back to the 16th century.
have you read the law?
No, I haven't read the law, but everybody agree. That's not one I have to vote on, so it's not one I have to read. But everybody agrees that what the law says. The law simply says that police are enjoined if they have any reason to think that a particular individual might be an illegal alien, to stop that person and arrest that person. And as a practical matter, it's not going to be the Canadians or the Swedes who are arrested, it's going to be the Mexicans.
Yeah.
Or more particularly, the people who look like Mexican, even if they're 4th or 5th or 6th generation American. You know, people don't often think about this, but that whole area in Arizona was part of Mexico before it was part of the United States. And the people who look Latino, who live in Arizona, in some cases were there long before any white settlers came to Arizona. Now the population has changed a bit, but the fact is that there are people who can trace back their lineage 6, 7, 8 generations or more who look Latino, and all those people are subject to arrest under this law. It's racism. It's obvious, blatant racism. How could anybody be in favor of that?
I think that there is a certain degree of racism depending on the individual, let's say law enforcement. The interpretation of law enforcement, there is a certain amount of flexibility there. The law states that a police officer cannot detain, arrest a person because he suspects that they are here illegally. He can only stop a person if that person is in the process of a violation of the law, which is not an immigration law.
I don't think that's true.
Yeah.
No, I don't think that's true.
I have a copy, a printout of the law, which I only got halfway through it, and there's a couple of things that I want to discuss with you. First, the law states in the first paragraph of the law, section 11-1051, and it says, a law enforcement official or agency of the state or a county, city, town, or other political subdivision of the state may not solely consider race, color, or national origin in implementing the requirements of the subsection.
Yes,
Now,
so what that means is that if you have dark skin and you're eating a guacamole, then you can get arrested. But he can't arrest you just on the basis of you're having dark skin.
Well,
Frijoles, you're in trouble. Dos Equis, you're in big trouble.
I don't agree with that. In the beginning it says, for any lawful contact stop. In other words,
No.
the stop has to be a lawful contact stop, which means that a police officer, in my interpretation, cannot stop you for any reason. He can't stop you because you're a good-looking woman and he wants the phone number. He can't stop you because of your color. It has to be a violation of the law.
You were kind enough to show me the bill, and when I read the bill, it confirmed what I thought earlier, which is that the fact that you are suspected to be an alien is enough to justify a stop under that bill. In other words, they don't have to show that they were stopping you for some other reason. If they think that you might be an illegal, they can stop you. And of course, if they're wrong, there's no harm. They just let you go.
Well, my interpretation of it is that they can't stop you.
Except for the fact that they violated your civil rights by stopping you in the first place because you were brown.
My interpretation, and I'm Puerto Rican, says that they cannot stop you for your color unless you have broken the law in some way, shape, or form. Now, I'm not saying.
No, it says
I'm not
solely.
saying,
The word solely is in there.
I understand.
And by the way, it also refers to the limit of the Constitution.
Okay. My take on it is that the weakness in the law is the human aspect at the police officer level, because you can't have a racist police officer who will stop someone. And I know that's happened here in Orlando, let alone in Arizona, who will stop someone because of color. We've had that come up in Orlando a whole bunch of times, and people have gotten shot over color that were unarmed.
No,
now,
listen, it's
but
far worse than that. It's far worse than that. What this is doing is it's licensing racism.
Okay, what we're going to do is we're going to take this law and we're going to put it up on the website so everybody can read it, and then you guys out there in the audience, you read it, and then you send me an email with your interpretation of it. And then next week, we'll get the folks to come back and they can say what they got out of it. Okay, we'll do it that way.
Well, that's
But
fine,
you've also
except for the
said-
fact that people's rights are going to be violated left
Well,
and right, regardless of what people write into you. And in fact, it's the judges who are going to end up interpreting this, and not people
I
who just
suspect
happen to
that
go
a
to your
lot
website.
of people who are going to get a ticket are going to go, race, you know, that's the first thing they're going to say. A lot of people who get
Well,
stopped,
wait a minute,
the first thing they're going to do is say that
so
they got
you
stopped
don't have
because
any
of race.
problem with tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of people being stopped in Arizona because of the way that they look and the fact that they're eating a tortilla.
No, I have no problem with people who break the law getting stopped. That I have no problem with.
And you have no problem with the fact that only brown people will be stopped under this bill at all, and white people will not be stopped.
Well, we have to wait and see. We have to wait and see whether white people
Okay,
get
you
stopped or
tell
not.
me which white people are going to be stopped.
Me.
The Austrians? Are
Maybe-
they going to be
well, I'm
stopped when
white.
they're visiting Arizona?
I'm white, and my plate's going to be a Hispanic plate, so I may be stopped.
Okay, what is it under that bill that would lead any white person to be stopped?
I have to put the bill up on the website.
Okay, go ahead.
And
Yes.
let's let the people decide. The bill clearly states to me that a police officer has to have a reason to stop you by you breaking the law or making an infraction against the law. Now, once a police officer stops you, then he asks you for ID. If you don't have ID, then he can pursue the matter of whether you're illegal or not. So, but I do agree that there is a weakness in the law where it comes down to the policeman's interpretation of how to execute that law. That I agree with. By the way, let's.
This law says
you
that
are
you
for
can be
employer
stopped.
sanctions.
Just a second. This law says you can be stopped and you could be arrested if the officer has any suspicion that you might be an illegal alien.
Well, to me, it says for a lawful stop. Now, a lawful stop means that the police officer, according to the regulation, says he can't stop anybody just for sake of stopping.
Do you think that someone's constitutional rights and their right under the 14th Amendment of the Constitution to be free of this kind of discrimination should turn on something like that? Shouldn't we be a little bit more careful before we violate people's rights on the basis of their race or their nationality?
I think that we should be more careful with protecting our borders, southern borders, when people are actually being murdered and robbed.
So the answer is
because
to arrest all the brown people?
No, to find who's breaking the law. We have to stop people who are breaking the law, and we have to protect the border from what's going on down there.
We can protect
you
ourselves
and I
quite
don't live there.
effectively.
You and I don't
protect
live on the
ourselves
border.
quite effectively without violating people's constitutional rights left and right.
Well, let's see what happens. Let's see how the law does violate, because I'm sure it's going to go to court, and a lot of people are going to complain about it, and we'll see what comes out in the soup. You know, let's see what comes out of the oven on this, okay?
Okay.
You are for employer sanctions, though, aren't you?
Yes.
Okay. Explain.
Well, I think,
You don't think that
most people who come here from other countries come here for an economic motivation. Not everybody. Sometimes they come for political reasons, like, for instance, the Pilgrims. Okay, the Pilgrims came for political reasons, not for economic reasons. All right?
Many
but
Hispanics
most
came
people,
for political reasons. Cubans came for
most
political
people,
reasons.
the majority who are here illegally come for economic reasons because they need a job. And they can find it in America because there are Americans who are willing to employ them. And I think that those Americans who are employing illegals knowingly should be punished. I think it's obvious. And I think that that would go a long way towards solving the problem, because if you had serious employer sanctions and people actually refused to hire people without firm evidence that they were legal, then they wouldn't come in the first place. There'd be no jobs available to them. That's how other countries deal with this problem. That, to me, is a fair solution to the problem.
Okay, well,
that doesn't involve, what we were talking about before. It doesn't involve what we were talking about before.
Well, that means that you're for part of the bill, because in SB 1070, it's a very strong employer sanctions. There are very strong employer sanctions for people who knowingly employ illegal aliens.
Yes, I mean, there's the legitimate question about whether a
pay them
state
cash
should be doing
instead
that.
of checks.
No, I mean,
And don't
yes.
collect taxes.
Right. I'm not sure that we should have 50 different rules about such things, but the answer is I'm in favor of employer sanctions.
Okay. And also, you're also for sharing of information with the federal government that's
Yes.
collected on a local level. What does that mean for the audience?
Well, what it means is that right now there's a legal bar between sharing information between the Customs and Immigration Service and local law enforcement authorities. I don't see any harm to sharing information, and I think that a lot of times the local law enforcement authorities are much more conversant about who should be there and who shouldn't. And they should be able to pass that information on pretty much at will to the federal authorities, and then let the federal authorities act on it. I think that's a useful thing, and that's in the bill.
Do you think that we have enough protection on the border, on the southern border of the United States, to prevent drugs, cartels from sending in drugs into the United States, from illegal processing of illegal activities coming into the United States?
No,
Are we capable?
I think we need more.
And what's the solution for that? What do you
devote,
think we should
to
do
devote
about
more
it?
resources. I mean, we're spending hundreds of billions of dollars chasing shadows in Afghanistan and Iraq, and I'd love to see those resources redeployed to our own borders to make sure that the people who are in charge of protecting the borders have enough money and have enough equipment or whatever else they might need, and enough staff to be able to effectively protect the borders.
Do you think the National Guard should be used as a backup, since they're already on? They're there. Should they be used?
It shouldn't
without
be
spending more money?
necessary. I mean, it's the job of the Customs and Immigration Service.
But they don't have enough money. They don't have enough money.
Then they should get more money. And if, I am in a position to influence that, and I voted in favor of increasing support for them. I don't think the border should be open. I think that's a disaster from both a national security and an economic perspective. We need to make sure that Americans have well-paying jobs and are not underbid by illegal aliens. That much is true, and I think that's obvious.
Okay. We had a good spirited discussion. Again, this is going to be up on the website, so you can look it up. You can take a look at the bill. Send me an email and tell me if you think I'm right or he's right. And then we'll put the results on television. I promise not to skew the results. This is Danny Ramos. We'll see you next week on Hispanic Speak Out. Congressman, thank you. Always a pleasure.
My pleasure.
We will
Thank
see
you.
you again hopefully soon.
It's 4 o'clock. You want to dial in?
Yeah, these calls would go a lot better if we had an office.
This is our office.
This is your daughter's dorm room, Bob.
Listen, we have internet, telephone,
Dorm room.
lounge. It's all free.
You could just do business at FedEx office. They've got Wi-Fi, workstations. A lot of them are open 24/7. It'll still save us an overhead.
Hey, baby. Here, give me sugar. Got a room.
Technically, this is her room.
Hello, we're on.
We understand. You want less overhead. FedEx office.
My universe is everything I imagine. I want to be a graphic designer. How can I get there? The Academy. It fits my busy lifestyle, and I can learn firsthand from instructors who've been there and know what it takes. Hey, my destiny is a career doing what I love, my way. My choice, my school. The International Academy of Design and Technology.
You imagine we can get you there. Call 1-800-932-2900. 1-800-932-2900.